Hundreds of people have come out.
When police started to use the tear gas.
One time at a speech or something, I got a question from the audience member. And I had been talking about the change in our civilization's deep stories, in our mythology, from an age of separation based on the idea of a separate self in a universe of other, competing with other separate selves in a world that is other, that doesn't possess the qualities of a self. That's just a bunch of generic particles bouncing around according to mathematical forces. That whole worldview that validates domination and control, that says that our well-being comes through overcoming the random forces of nature and the competing other beings in the world. That whole mindset, that whole story, I describe how it is transitioning, how it's falling apart, how all of the systems built on that story are crumbling, propelling us or even birthing us first into a space between stories where everything we thought we knew is no longer valid. And we're coming to this humility on a personal level too, many of us, as the structures of normal life break down as well, of career, of marriage, of how to keep yourself healthy. The instruction set that we got doesn't work anymore. So we're going through this transition personally, politically, ecologically, our medical system, our technological system, educational system, none of it's working the way that we thought it was. And so getting propelled then into a new story, which is also an ancient story, a story of interbeing, a story that understands that what we do to the other happens to us somehow as well. A story that understands that the world outside of ourselves has consciousness, has intelligence, has beingness, that we're not alone here. So someone said, okay, what do I do though? What do I do? What do I do politically? What do I do in my dealings with the organization, with the local government, with my mother-in-law? I mean, how do I actually take this idea into action? And so I thought of a universal formula, which I usually don't believe in. But in this case, the universal formula is a question. And the question is, what is it like to be you? On the ecological level, we can apply that to rivers, to forests, to other species, to individual plants and animals. We can say, what is it like to be you? That opens up questions, well, what does the river want? What does the soil want? How can I contribute to your well-being so that perhaps you will contribute then to my well-being, because we're not really separate. But to take the point of view of a non-human being, that's kind of radical, because the old story, in the guise of science, said that soil, water, rivers, mountains, clouds, they don't have a full degree of beingness, if they have any at all. They're just a bunch of stuff, some matter. And so to ask that question is quite radical, and it's kind of a return to a pantheistic worldview, an animistic worldview, the worldview that indigenous people had and still have in many parts of the world. They understood that other beings are in fact beings, and that it's not nonsense to communicate with them, to ask what they want, and to understand ourselves as one of many peoples on this earth. And then we can apply that politically too. And here's where it gets really edgy for some people, to say, what is it like to be Donald Trump? What is it like to be an oil executive? What is it like to be a racist? What is it like to be the person that you vilify and demonize and dehumanize? Because that's kind of the common denominator. When I read right-wing websites, when I read right-wing websites, left-wing websites, the comment sections, they disagree about issues, but they agree on one thing, which is that the people on the other side, there's something wrong with them. They're not as intelligent as we are. They're not as open-minded as we are. They don't pay attention to facts. They have some moral or intellectual deficiency that explains why they disagree with us, the good people, the smart people, the moral people. Both sides kind of agree on that. Therefore, both sides also agree on certain tactics that come from that. These are the tactics of domination, the tactics of war. The general formula being, find an enemy and defeat that enemy. We are so programmed to war thinking that when we're faced with a situation where there is no enemy anymore, we don't know what to do. So we desperately search for an enemy to apply our accustomed tactics of force, control, domination. So, for example, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there was this desperate moment of trying to find an enemy. For a while, you may remember the candidate was Colombian drug lords. And they even made movies where the Colombian drug lords were inflated to some incredible power that was a threat to civilization. But that wasn't very convincing. And finally, this search for an enemy resulted in terror, terrorists. And even that's not that convincing, but our system doesn't operate without an enemy. And now it's kind of turning into whatever Russia or China or Iran. By the time you watch this video, it probably will have shifted to something else. But it's almost like we don't know how to be in the absence of an enemy, in the absence of something to blame. So we take every problem and turn it into a war by trying to find an enemy. And what we're really doing is we're taking a problem that we don't know how to solve and turning it into a counterfeit problem that we do know how to solve. So, for example, we don't know how to solve the problem of crime, which is an outgrowth of deep social conditions that go all the way down to our basic financial system, the way that money is created in our society. Like, that's not something we know how to solve. But if you blame it on criminals, then you know how to solve it. It's easy. You use the tactics of force, of domination. You lock them up. If the problem is terrorism, we don't know how to solve the deep conditions that give birth to terrorism, which implicates our entire world economy and political system. So let's instead blame it on these scary, horrible terrorists who are just bad. That's why they do it. They're bad. Solution then is easy. Kill the terrorists. We apply that mindset to agriculture. Problem, low crop yields. Reason, weeds. Solution, kill the weeds. Or reason, insects. Solution, kill the insects. Problem, Zika virus. Solution, spraying campaigns. Eradicate the mosquitoes. Problem, I'm eating too much. Solution, control my overeating. Again, ignoring the deep matrix of causes that give birth to that behavior. Like, why am I eating when I'm not hungry? What other need, what invisible need is being met when I overeat? So when we accept that the oil executive, the Trump supporter, the criminal, the terrorist isn't doing it because he's just bad, but is doing it out of a situation that if we were in that situation, we would do it too. It's an understanding that I'm not really different from you. If I were in your shoes, my brother, I would do the same thing. When we understand that, we no longer can jump to a superficial culprit that isn't the real culprit. Our energy that wants to change the world, that wants to heal the world, is no longer diverted onto a fake, it's no longer displaced onto something that isn't really the cause. And that then directs that energy toward a deeper level and directs it first toward, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about this problem. That's actually an improvement over thinking you know what to do, but actually perpetuating the problem, which is what happens. You know, bombing the terrorists does not solve the problem. It worsens the problem. It adds to the conditions that are part of the problem. The same thing can happen even medically when if you have recurring strep throat or ear infections and you take antibiotics, well, it might work temporarily, just like bombing the terrorists might work temporarily, but it disrupts body ecology and immunity, and perhaps the infection recurs because of that disruption. Same thing with our agricultural system that progressively degrades the land and destroys the soil ecology, making it weaker so that insects and weeds have even a greater advantage than before. So we get trapped in this pattern of attacking the symptom in ways that worsen the cause. So when we exercise our compassion and stop blaming the most proximate culprit, we enter a deeper radicalism that says, okay, I don't know what the real answer is, but I'm going to look. And we become open to understanding the deep conditions that are manifesting as the symptoms that we call terrorism, crime, racism, misogyny, ignorance, greed. Even greed, that's a symptom of conditions of scarcity. And when we become aware of the complexity and the depth of the true causes of the symptoms, we realize that our normal war-making habits do not work. And we don't know what to do anymore because we're so conditioned to those habits. So the first step toward deeper radicalism then is not knowing what to do. The next step, well, I can't say exactly what the next step is, but appreciating reality, understanding the real situation, at least we're in reality and we're able to be creative and to creatively respond to the complex matrix of causes and conditions. So for example, when I understand, okay, you're acting in a racist way, not because you're just like some bad person or racist, but because, I don't know, maybe it's because you feel betrayed by the system and you want to blame somebody and you're being offered this person to blame or this group of people to blame. And I understand now where it's coming from. And maybe I understand the culture you grew up in and I understand what hurts in you. And so maybe I can meet these conditions somehow. I'm not sure how, but in the moment, when you're really asking, what is it like to be you? Then you will find access to tremendous creativity. And the other person will pick up on that. Will pick up on that you're not trying to just dominate and defeat them, but that you care about them, that you're asking that question. You've probably had this experience of somebody really seeing you as human and saying, what is it like to be you? I want to understand you. And then your guard relaxes and a connection can form. And maybe then you'll be much more open to expanding your reality or to acknowledging truths that were hard, that were painful to see, because you know you're not being attacked. So I think that this is a formula that can be used politically as well as ecologically and even interpersonally. Because we do it all the time. I hear people doing it all the time interpersonally too. Like, why did so-and-so do that? How could they? Appalling. What's wrong with them? It's almost a reflex. Someone pulls out in front of you into traffic, and the reflexive response is, what's wrong with them? I wouldn't have done that. Asshole. None of that is based on truth. In fact, if you were that person, you would have done it too. You would have pulled right out there. If you were in a hurry, if you were fighting with your spouse, if you just got yelled at by your boss, I don't know, whatever the situation was. So blame then is replaced by curiosity. What happened to you to turn you into somebody who would do that? Curiosity leads to creativity. That's the alternative to a world of endless war. We've been fighting an endless war for thousands of years. And evil has not yet been defeated. Does that mean we have to fight harder? Or could it be that the mentality of war making creates endless enemies and perpetuates itself? Not that there's never a time to fight, but we're trapped in a habit of fighting that is based all the way down to our worldview of separation. The question, what is it like to be you, is a way to heal the separation. You could call it compassion, empathy. It's not something you do to be a good person. It's something you do because it brings you to the truth. And it brings you to your creative power as an agent of change in this world.